Sometimes the most powerful moments begin with something small, like a little girl staring at someone else's plate. When a 4-star general tried to leave quietly, she never expected a single dad to notice, or that kindness shared over lunch could rewrite the course of their lives. But what unfolded next, no one saw coming. If stories of quiet courage, second chances, and unexpected love speak to your heart, we invite you to stay with us. Subscribe to our channel and let these true-to-spirit tales remind you. Sometimes healing begins with a simple act of kindness. The harbor diner sat quietly at the edge of the naval town, half forgotten, between a laundromat and a dusty hardware store. Its checkered floors had dulled with time, but the smell of fried chicken and coffee was as faithful as a morning reveille. There was a kind of stillness to the place around noon, when the breakfast crowd had long gone, and the lunch rush hadn't yet begun. A stillness that held stories. Blake Morgan slid into his usual booth near the window, the green of his worn fatigues almost blending into the wooden walls. His hair, sun-streaked and shoulder-length, was tucked behind one ear. His face quietly handsome. Rugged like an old photograph, looked across the table at the boy sitting opposite him. Liam, 9 years old, and already wiser than most adults, Blake knew was tapping the rim of his glass with a straw. There was a small smirk dancing on the corner of his lips. "You know what day this is, right?" Blake asked. Liam looked up, pretending to think. "Tuesday." Blake grinned. "It's the day the sea breeze changes." Blake leaned in. "Back when I flew rescue off the coast this time of year, the wind would shift. You could smell the salt in the hangar before you saw the waves, like the ocean was calling her people home." Liam blinked. "That's either really cool or really weird." "Both," Blake said, chuckling. "That's how you know it's true." Their plates arrived: fried chicken, golden fries, cornbread glistening with melted butter. Blake always ordered extra. Old habit. Navy habit. Then the bell above the door rang, and the diner fell silent. Boots clicked softly on tile. Not heavy, but precise. Poised. The kind of walk that carried both rank and weight. Lieutenant General Lauren Mitchell stood in the doorway, sunlight gleaming off her olive-green service uniform. 4 stars shimmered across her chest, each one a symbol of wars won, losses endured, and decisions made in rooms that never saw daylight. She scanned the diner like she'd done 1,000 command briefings. Then, she exhaled, carrying herself not like a conqueror, but a mother trying not to draw attention. She guided a small girl, no older than 5, to a table in the corner. Mia. The child had soft curls like wild wheat, a white dress that danced with every step, and the wide-eyed look of someone who noticed more than she let on. Lauren ordered a modest meal. 2 plates, but both half portions. 1 cup of water. No dessert. At Blake's table, Liam had already noticed. "Dad," he whispered, barely moving. "She's staring." Blake followed his son's glance. Mia wasn't trying to be rude, but her gaze was fixed on Liam's plate, on the fried chicken, the cornbread, the crisp, steaming fries. Her tiny hand clutched the edge of her empty plate like it might magically fill itself. And in that instant, Blake's breath caught. Not because it was awkward, but because he'd been that child. Decades ago. A hot summer, a lunchroom, a kid with nothing on his tray but water and a napkin, and another boy who never offered a thing. Blake rose without a word. "Dad?" Liam asked, confused. Blake picked up a plate with extra food and walked over to the general's table. Lauren looked up. For a moment, her spine stiffened reflex. Her eyes locked on the stranger. She didn't recognize him. No badges, no uniform. Just a man with long hair, a strong jaw, and the quiet kind of confidence that didn't need salutes. He nodded politely. "Ma'am, I ordered too much. If it's all right with you, we'd be honored if Mia joined us." Lauren blinked. It wasn't the words that caught her off guard. It was the way he said them, unassuming, no pity, no condescension. Just kindness. I appreciate the offer, she said carefully. But we're fine. Mia tugged at her sleeve, whispering something. Lauren hesitated. Then, she nodded, and the whole diner seemed to exhale again. 4 people. 1 booth. 2 children already giggling over who got the last fry. Lauren sat awkwardly at first, her back still straight, her posture immaculate. But something about the way Blake let Liam talk freely, how he listened without interrupting, how he treated Mia like a person and not a child, began to melt the frost. "So what brings you to harbor?" she asked. Blake shrugged. "Maintenance crew at the hangars. Keeps me near the runways. Old habits die hard." Lauren studied him. Military. Once. Branch Navy. Rescue pilot. Her eyes flickered. Which unit? Blake took a sip of his water. I stopped counting after they buried the 3rd. Silence. Then Mia dropped a fry. Liam picked it up and offered her a new one. Lauren watched them. She hasn't smiled like that in weeks. Blake didn't reply. He just looked at Mia, then at Liam. "They remember more than we think," he finally said. "The loneliness, the silence, the pretending everything's fine." Lauren didn't speak for a long while. Her hand absent-mindedly brushed a medal on her chest. "I used to believe medals meant something," she said softly. "Now? I think it's the people we can sit and eat with that count more." Blake smiled faintly. "Food's cheaper than therapy." They both laughed, quiet, genuine, a little surprised. When the plates were clean and the laughter had faded into soft chatter, Lauren stood. She reached into her uniform pocket and placed a 20 on the table. "Thank you," she said. "For the meal." Blake didn't even look at the bill. He pushed it gently back toward her. "Keep it, ma'am." "I don't take money for a smile." Lauren froze. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't charity. It was dignity. Spoken softly, like a man who knew what it meant to starve of food, of company, of warmth, and wanted no one else to feel it. She gathered Mia, who waved at Liam before taking her mother's hand. As they walked away, Mia looked up and asked Mommy, "Was he a soldier?" 2, Lauren looked over her shoulder one last time. Blake had returned to his booth, laughing at something Liam said, his fingers brushing crumbs off the table. I think Lauren said slowly he was a soldier, who stopped needing medals. Outside, the sun shone a little warmer, and something cracked just a little in the stone that had long wrapped around her heart. A hairline fracture, the kind that lets the light in. The harbor diner had returned to its lazy hum after the general left. Coffee poured, silverware, clinked, lives resumed. But Blake Morgan sat still. Not because the food was unfinished, or the moment wasn't, but because something had shifted. Subtle, like a new current under old waters. Liam crunched the last fry and looked up at his father. Was she really a General 4-star? Blake replied, wiping a spot off his plate. That's as high as they come, unless you're talking about 5-star legends like Eisenhower or MacArthur. But those days are gone. She didn't look mean, Liam said. She looked tired. Blake paused at that. Kids always saw what adults missed. She's been carrying a lot of weight for a long time, Blake murmured. Sometimes rank comes with silence more than applause. He stacked the plates with Navy precision and gave the server a nod. Thanks, Deb. Best lunch I've had in a while. Deb, a woman who'd served pie and wisdom for 30 years, arched a brow. Blake Morgan, you've been coming here every Thursday for 2 years. What made today different? Blake smiled faintly. Someone remembered how to share. 2 days passed. Then 3. The moment at the diner lingered in Lauren Mitchell's mind longer than she expected. She had reviewed after-action reports, while her daughter drew butterflies on the edge of classified documents. She had signed off on logistics briefings, while Mia napped in a blanket under her desk. But her mind always wandered back to that plate of food, that quiet man's voice, and the strange warmth that bloomed in her chest. It had been so long since she felt anything that wasn't strategy, control, or command. So when Mia looked up from her cereal and said, "Can we go to that place again?" with the chicken and the boy and the smile, Lauren didn't hesitate. They returned on Saturday. Blake wasn't there. Mia's disappointment was quiet but visible. She stirred her applesauce with the solemn intensity of a deployed diplomat. Lauren scanned the booths, part of her not that she'd admit it had hoped to see him too. She wasn't sure why. He was a civilian, a janitor or technician or whatever the hangar log said. But there was something about him. He didn't flinch at stars. He didn't boast or submit. He simply offered without agenda. That unsettled her more than any hostile negotiation she'd faced in the Pacific. "Do you want to sit here?" the waitress asked. Lauren hesitated, then nodded. Mia pouted. "He's not here." "No," Lauren said. "But the food still is." They sat, ordered again. Small portions, no dessert. And that would have been that. Until the bell rang behind them. Lauren didn't turn. She didn't have to. She recognized the rhythm of those boots, the unhurried step, the soft scrape of rubber soles against tile, the slight favoring of the left leg. A Navy injury, no doubt. Blake Morgan. He spotted them immediately. His expression didn't change much, but his eyes warmed. He approached their table a little cautious. "General." "Mr. Morgan," Lauren said, her voice cool but not unkind. "Back for another therapeutic lunch, something like that," he said, sliding a hand over the back of the chair. "Though today I didn't overorder." Mia perked up like a flower in spring. "You don't have chicken today. I can fix that," Blake said with a smile. Liam trotted in a beat later, eyes lighting up. Mia, in less than a minute, the two kids were negotiating napkins and ketchup packets like ambassadors. Lauren observed it with curiosity, this instant alliance between small hearts. No politics, no ranks, just shared joy. Blake sat across from her. The same booth, same seat, but now something unspoken connected them. "I hope you didn't mind last time," he said. "I wasn't trying to make you uncomfortable." Lauren folded her napkin precisely. "You didn't? You caught me off guard." He nodded. "Been there." There was a pause. Not awkward, just careful. She studied him openly this time, the creases near his eyes, the soft beard that was more survivor than style, the hands strong, calloused, but steady. "You said you were Navy," she began. He nodded once. 15 years. Rescue pilot. We did extractions and typhoons downed aircraft, even got caught in a monsoon once. Lauren raised a brow. "You don't strike me as reckless." "I wasn't," he said. "I just believed no one should die alone." That silenced her for a moment. She stirred her coffee, watching the cream swirl like a memory refusing to settle. "You still fly?" Blake shook his head. "Grounded myself after the crash." She looked up sharply. "You crashed?" "No," he said softly, "but my co-pilot did. He died trying to save another crew. I made it out. He didn't. And after that, the sky never felt the same." Lauren swallowed. "I'm sorry. I've heard that phrase 100 times," Blake said not unkindly. "Yours is the first one, I believe." Their eyes met. And for the first time in years, Lauren Mitchell didn't feel like a general being debriefed. She felt like a woman, being seen. Maya tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, can we sit with them again?" Lauren hesitated. Then she looked at Blake. He gave the barest nod as if to say, "No pressure. Your call." Lauren rose, gathered her tray, moved to his table. The kids cheered like it was a holiday. They sat again this time, not strangers. And the silence that once felt stiff now carried something warmer. Something tentative, but real. Over the course of that lunch, stories came easier. Liam told Mia about a turtle he found on base. Mia told him it needed a name like Admiral Bubbles. Blake laughed. Lauren smiled despite herself. Lauren asked Blake what books Liam liked. Blake asked Mia if she wanted to be a pilot like her mom. Mia shrugged. No. Pilots get yelled at. Lauren almost choked on her tea. Excuse me? Blake leaned in. She's not wrong. You should see the flight debriefings. Lauren shot him a mock glare. Don't push it, sailor. He raised a brow. Did you just call me sailor? I outrank you in every dimension. And yet Blake said, gesturing at the table, You're eating my fries? Lauren looked down. Mia had slid half of his fries to her mother's plate while no one noticed. And Lauren hadn't stopped her. She laughed softly, fully. It had been years since she'd laughed without first checking who was watching. When the meal ended, Lauren stood. No tip this time, she said firmly. Blake looked amused. Ma'am, that wasn't a transaction. It was lunch. Yes, she said, lifting Mia into her arms. And maybe next time I'll buy. He paused, then said gently, I'd like that. They parted ways under the golden hour light spilling through the diner windows. Blake and Liam walked to their car. Lauren held Mia's hand just a little tighter. That night, as she tucked Mia in, Lauren heard her daughter whisper, Mommy, I think that man makes the air quieter. Lauren sat on the edge of the bed. Why do you say that? Because when he talks, you don't have to be strong. Lauren swallowed hard. Out of the mouths of babes. She brushed Mia's curls from her forehead, kissed her gently, and whispered, Maybe. He does. The afternoon light at Harbor Diner faded gently into gold, the kind that made glass sparkle, and shadows stretch long across cracked sidewalks. Lauren Mitchell stood near the door, one hand on Mia's small shoulder, the other adjusting the silver pin on her uniform, an unconscious gesture of control. Control was her default setting. It had to be. 4 stars didn't allow room for hesitation. They were forged in silence, duty, and sacrifice. But today had been different. She could still hear Mia's laughter echoing in her chest. And worse, she could feel her own smile lingering like the warmth of a forgotten song, the kind she hadn't dared hum in years. Blake Morgan rose slowly from his booth, gathering plates with the efficiency of someone who used to secure aircraft cabins mid-storm. Liam slipped on his baseball cap, the brim a little too big for his face, and flashed Mia a grin. The 2 children bumped fists like old friends. Lauren reached into her wallet and pulled out a crisp 20. She walked back toward the table, military poise in every step. Thank you, she said, extending the bill toward Blake. For lunch, for everything. He looked down at the money, then up at her eyes, steady, unreadable. No, ma'am. Lauren blinked. Excuse me. He held her gaze, voice low but calm. Keep it. I don't take money for a smile. The words hung in the air. Not defiant, not smug, just honest, unapologetically kind. Lauren's fingers tensed around the bill. She wasn't used to rejection, especially not from men who worked under hangars and wiped grease off bolts all day. She opened her mouth to reply but found nothing appropriate in her mental Rolodex of responses. Not for this. Mia tugged at her sleeve. Mommy, is he in trouble? Lauren looked down, then back at Blake. No, she said, finally. He just said something that made me. Pause. He gave a faint nod. Some words are heavier than they sound. She slipped the bill back into her pocket and nodded. I'll remember that. With that, she turned. Mia waved. Liam waved back. Lauren didn't look back, but she felt something tug at her shoulders, a strange reluctance to leave. They stepped outside. The sky had turned soft with pastel clouds, and the sea breeze carried the faint scent of brine and rusted steel from the shipyard. Mia's tiny footsteps skipped along the pavement, but her mind was clearly somewhere else. Mommy, yes, that man. Mr. Blake. He talked like a movie. Lauren smiled despite herself. You mean he sounded like an actor? No, like the part where the hero says something quiet and then saves the day after. Lauren's smile faltered, because Mia didn't know the weight of those words. But she did. A soldier who stopped needing medals. A man who gave freely without wanting anything in return. A father who could silence a room not with rank, but with kindness. Mia skipped a few steps ahead, twirling under the low sun. Do you think he used to be a soldier too? Lauren stopped walking. Her eyes followed her daughter, this small, bright spirit that had pulled her through the worst of deployments and darkest of debriefings. Then she glanced back at the diner's window. Through the glass, Blake was wiping the table clean, his son helping with a napkin too large for his hand. He wasn't wearing medals, but Lauren saw something now she hadn't before. He carried them in silence. She turned and walked on, holding Mia's hand tighter than before. That night, Lauren sat at her kitchen table long after Mia had gone to sleep. The base housing unit was quiet, clinical, efficient, impersonal. Every corner measured, every drawer organized. A life of symmetry and protocol. But tonight it felt cold. She sipped tea, its steam fogging the small photograph beside her elbow, Mia's kindergarten picture. A second image was tucked behind it, faded from years in her rucksack. Her own graduation from Annapolis. There were no pictures of her smiling like she had at the diner. She had always told herself that being strong meant keeping your distance, from emotions, from softness, from people who reminded you that life wasn't only about orders and outcomes. But Blake Morgan hadn't asked anything of her. And yet in one simple sentence, I don't take money for a smile, he'd disarmed her more than any adversary she'd faced. She leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. Maybe it wasn't him that unsettled her. Maybe it was how safe she felt for the first time in years. Blake tucked Liam in around the same time. Dad. Yeah, buddy. Was that her real hair? Blake raised an eyebrow. What, the general? It looked like her hair could command a tank. Blake laughed softly. I think it probably has. Liam rolled onto his side. Do you think we'll see them again? Blake adjusted the blankets. Maybe. But even if we don't, we were lucky to meet them today. Liam blinked slowly. You didn't let her pay. Nope. Why not? Blake paused. Because sometimes when someone spent their whole life giving orders, they forget what it's like to just receive kindness. Liam nodded, already drifting. Blake turned off the light, but the words echoed in his head long after. He had offered the meal because a child looked hungry. But he hadn't expected the mother to look hungry too. Not for food, for connection. 2 days later, Lauren stood in her office. Uniform, pressed ribbons gleaming, but her mind elsewhere. She had just dismissed her senior staff from a morning briefing. Nothing about global logistics or fleet maintenance seemed as urgent as the memory of a smile over ketchup-stained plates. Mia had drawn something that morning, 2 stick figures sharing a plate of fries. One had long hair, the other had stars on her chest. The caption, scrawled in pink crayon, read, My Mommy and Mr. Blake's Fries. Lauren stared at it, then slid it into her desk drawer. She wasn't ready to define what this was, but she was starting to hope. It wasn't just coincidence. It was something quieter, stronger. The kind of moment that doesn't announce itself with fanfare but whispers and waits and invites you to stay. The following week passed like a page turning in slow motion. Lauren Mitchell was back in her office at Pacific Command HQ, giving briefings, reviewing flight logs, signing off on deployment rotations. Her days were stitched together with urgency and precision, but her mind kept slipping. Not during missions, not during matters of war and peace, but in the quiet, in the in-between moments, when her coffee steamed just a little longer than it should, when she passed the mirror and caught the faintest trace of something softer in her eyes. She didn't say his name aloud, but she heard it in Mia's voice almost daily. "Mommy, can we go back to the place with the lemon pie and Mr. Blake?" Or Liam said he named his turtle Admiral Bubbles too each time Lauren deflected, politely, gently. And yet something within her stirred, a part she'd long since filed away next to old photographs and unopened letters in the back of a drawer, marked, "Someday." Saturday came like it always did. But for once, Lauren didn't have to report to any security council, nor draft any regional readiness memos. Mia woke early, bounding into the room with the kind of kinetic joy only children possessed. "Mom, the sun is out. We have to go somewhere today." "It's a rule." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "A rule, huh?" "Yes," Mia said, climbing onto the bed and bouncing on her knees. "It's Saturday. It's the law." Lauren laughed, really laughed. "Well, if the law says so." They packed a small lunch, filled a thermos, and drove toward the park near the edge of the base. It wasn't fancy, just grass swings and a few uneven benches shaded by old eucalyptus trees that had seen more secrets than most briefings. Lauren didn't expect to see anyone she knew, and certainly not him. Blake Morgan was sitting on a weathered bench near the sand pit, his elbows resting on his knees, watching Liam fly a foam glider that looped lazily through the spring air. He wore the same green fatigues, sleeves rolled halfway. A soft breeze pushed strands of his long hair across his cheek, and he didn't bother brushing them away. His expression was relaxed, like a man who no longer rushed the clock. Mia was the first to see him. Her little gasp was all the warning Lauren got before her daughter sprinted forward, arms pumping. Blake looked up, startled at first, then smiling. Liam dropped the glider and turned just in time to be tackled in a hug that nearly knocked him over. Lauren approached slower, more cautious, like a soldier, uncertain if they were on foreign ground. Blake stood when he saw her. "General, Mr. Morgan." But the formality fell flat in the sunlight, especially with their children laughing like old war buddies beside them. Lauren gestured toward the bench. "Mind if I sit?" He stepped aside. Not at all. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just watched the kids tumble in the grass, laughing about something only the young could understand. Then Blake said softly, "Didn't expect to see you here." "Same." "But I'm glad," he added, almost a whisper. Lauren turned her face slightly toward him, the wind brushing her uniform collar. "You ever wonder," she said, "why life keeps bringing certain people back into your orbit?" Blake shrugged. "Maybe fate has bad aim." Lauren smiled, but it faded gently. "Or maybe it's just persistent." They sat in silence again, but this time it was companionable, like two veterans who'd survived different battles but still bore the same ache in their bones. "I used to come here when Mia was little," Lauren said, watching her daughter swing high. "But then things got complicated." Blake didn't pry. He just nodded. She stopped laughing for a while, Lauren added. "It scared me more than any missile ever did." Blake leaned back. "That's the part they don't train you for. The silence in your kid's room." Lauren glanced at him. "You've been through it. My wife passed when Liam was 4. The house got quiet. Too quiet. That's why I kept the job at the hangar. I needed the noise, the routine." Lauren swallowed her voice, softening. "I'm sorry. Me too." The wind picked up slightly, and a seagull cried overhead, gliding above the playground like a lone sentinel. Lauren folded her hands. "Sometimes I think I've worn this uniform so long, I don't know who I am without it." Blake turned to her. "Maybe that's not a bad thing." "How do you mean?" He looked at her. Not her rank, not her ribbons, just her. You spent your life protecting others, but maybe now it's time to protect something different, something closer. Lauren met his gaze, and for the first time didn't look away. There was no flirtation in his words, just truth, quiet, centered. "You always talk like that?" she asked. "Only on weekends," Blake said with a grin. She chuckled, then exhaled long and slow. "I forgot what this felt like. What sitting, talking, no tactics, no chain of command. Just this." Blake nodded. "Me too." The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting gold across the fields. Liam and Mia were now building a small fort out of sticks and grass, defending it against imaginary dragons. Blake stood and stretched. "We were just about to grab ice cream down the block." Lauren rose too. "That's one order I'll happily follow." He raised an eyebrow. "Following orders now, General." She smirked. "Just don't get used to it." As the four of them walked side by side toward the corner shop, passers-by might have seen them and assumed they were one family. Nothing out of the ordinary. But for Lauren Mitchell, who had spent decades behind walls, titles, and secrets, this simple walk was extraordinary. And for Blake Morgan, who had stopped expecting anything new from life, this was the beginning of something he hadn't dared hope for. Something healing. Something real. The rain came in sudden sheets, hammering the rooftops like forgotten drums. On the base, headlights blurred into watercolor streaks, and the wind howled with the urgency of things unsaid. Blake Morgan stood at the kitchen window of his modest off-base home, arms folded as he watched the storm rip across the street. Liam sat at the table behind him, drawing with crayons, humming an old folk song they used to play in the hangar. The clock read 8:27 p.m. Blake sipped from his chipped navy mug, black coffee lukewarm now. The phone rang. Unknown number. He hesitated. Normally he wouldn't answer. But something instinct, maybe, or the soft, unshakable pull of intuition sharpened by years of flying into chaos, told him to pick up. "Hello, static." Then a child's voice, small and shaking. "Chew, Blake." He froze. "Mia." There was a stifled sob on the other end. "I don't know what to do." "Mikan. Mikan got Roy." He could barely make out the words. Rain hammered louder. "Where are you, Mia? Tell me." In the car. The one with the blue blanket in the back. Near the old gate. I don't know. Blake didn't wait. He dropped the mug, grabbed his jacket, and shouted to Liam. "Stay here. Lock the doors. Don't open for anyone but me." The boy nodded, eyes wide. And then Blake was out the door, swallowed by the night. The base's north gate had long been retired from use, just a rusted guard booth and a sagging chain-link fence surrounded by overgrown brush and puddles deep enough to mirror lightning. That's where he found them. Lauren's SUV sat parked on a slant, headlights off, wipers motionless. Rain danced on the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Blake rushed to the driver's side. Lauren was slumped over the wheel. Her uniform soaked her chest, rising slowly but unnaturally. Her face was pale, too pale. Mia sat in the back, curled up with a damp, stuffed bear, tears carving rivers on her cheeks. Blake opened the door. "Mia, it's okay. I'm here." She launched into his arms, sobbing. He placed her gently in the back seat, pulled off his jacket and wrapped it around her. Then he turned to Lauren. She wasn't unconscious, but barely holding on. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused. Her breathing ragged. He tapped her cheek lightly. "Lauren." "Hey. Look at me." She tried to speak, but no words came, only a weak shake of the head. Blake scooped her up without hesitation, arms cradling her, like he once did crash survivors off the coast of Okinawa. Her body was cold, her uniform soaked through. Feverish pulse, exhaustion, dehydration maybe, a breakdown. He didn't know yet. He just knew she needed saving, and for once she wouldn't fight it. At the hospital, things moved fast. Lauren was admitted immediately. Signs of acute exhaustion, borderline collapse, high blood pressure, elevated heart rate. All indicators of someone who'd been running too long on too little for far too many years. Blake sat in the hallway, soaked, shivering, Mia asleep against his chest. He stared at the fluorescent light above him. He hated hospitals. The smell of antiseptic, the hollow echoes of shoes on tile, the memories of watching someone die and being told it wasn't his fault, even when he never believed them. A nurse approached. "You brought her in?" "Yes. She's stable now. Resting." Blake exhaled. "She's lucky," the nurse added. "Most people don't listen to the warning signs. But it's a miracle someone found her." He didn't reply, because he knew Lauren wouldn't have asked anyone else for help. But her daughter had. And Blake had answered. It was nearly midnight when he stepped into Lauren's hospital room. She lay in a white bedfoot, dripping slowly, her skin warmer now, but her eyes tired, in a way that went beyond sickness. She turned her head when she saw him. "I told you," she whispered, voice hoarse. "You didn't have to do this." He stepped closer, gently lowering Mia onto the couch beside the bed. "And I told you what kind of man lets someone fall if he knows how to catch them." Lauren let out a soft breath, half laugh, half sob. Her hand trembled on the blanket. "Blake, I didn't want you to see me like this." "Like what, weak?" He shook his head. "You're not weak, Lauren. You're tired. And that's not the same thing." She blinked. "You don't understand. I've commanded fleets, sat across from admirals. I've led under fire. But the last few months, I've felt like a house built on sand." Blake pulled a chair closer, sitting beside her. "You've been holding up a world no one else could see," he said softly. "And maybe, just maybe, it's time to let someone hold you for a change." The words hit her like rain against glass, gentle, persistent, impossible to ignore. A tear slipped down her cheek. "I didn't want to admit I couldn't do it all. No one can. But I've always had to." Blake leaned forward, his hand resting lightly atop hers. Maybe not anymore. The room was quiet for a while. Mia stirred in her sleep. The monitor beeped steadily beside them. Then Lauren spoke again, her voice quieter than a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Blake looked at her for a long moment. "Because I know what it feels like to fall apart in secret," he thought. "Because I see you behind the uniform. Because maybe I need saving too." But what he said was, "Because sometimes the best thing we can do for someone strong is remind them they don't have to be." Lauren closed her eyes, not in retreat, but in trust. And for the first time in years, she let the silence cradle her instead of command it. That night, as the rain eased into mist, Blake sat beside her bed until morning. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. His presence said enough. That she wasn't alone anymore. That someone had seen past the stars on her shoulder and still stayed. And as dawn crept through the blinds, painting soft light on Mia's sleeping face and Lauren's open palm resting near his, Blake realized this wasn't the beginning of something new. It was the return of something long lost. Human connection. Undemanding. Unspoken. Unbreakable. 3 days had passed since the storm. Lauren Mitchell stood in her kitchen, wearing a soft gray sweater instead of her uniform for the first time in years. The fabric clung awkwardly at her shoulders, as if her body no longer knew how to hold comfort. She poured Mia a bowl of cereal, watching her daughter hum to herself, a butterfly hair clip tucked neatly above one ear. There was laughter again. Light. Soft. Unburdened. And it terrified her. Because laughter to Lauren had always been a luxury. Something that came after the reports were filed, the lives counted, the chain of command obeyed. But now, It came first. From Mia. From Blake. From somewhere inside herself she hadn't felt in decades. She turned toward the window. The sky was clear, the air cool. No briefings, no flags at half-mast, just a Tuesday. Mia looked up between spoonfuls. "Mommy, yes. Can we visit Mr. Blake and Liam today? He said we could see the big planes." Lauren hesitated. Blake had called that morning his voice. Calm, steady, familiar now, in a way that warmed her, like the low rumble of an aircraft engine she used to trust with her life. "I've got the base clearance," he had said. "No uniforms required. Just bring a smile." She hadn't answered right away, but now with Mia's wide eyes searching hers, Lauren found herself nodding. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's go see the planes." The old hangar at the edge of the decommissioned runway hadn't seen active deployment in years, but it had become a resting place for legends, FA-18's Hueys, even the battered shell of a C-2 Greyhound that once carried medevac teams into combat zones. Blake stood at the entrance in his worn green fatigues, sleeves rolled clipboard in hand. His long hair was tied back streaks of silver near the temples, catching the light like ribbons of quiet resilience. When he saw Lauren and Mia approaching, he waved not a salute, not a gesture of command, just a human hello. "Welcome to my museum," he said, grinning. "Entrance fee is one smile." Lauren raised an eyebrow. "That's extortion." He leaned in. "Then call it a personal tax." She smiled without meaning to. It surprised them both. Inside the hangar, the children ran ahead. Liam gave Mia a tour like a seasoned docent, pointing at tail fins and cockpit gauges with all the seriousness of a miniature flight commander. Blake and Lauren walked slower, their footsteps echoing softly between steel and shadow. "She's a different child," he said. Lauren nodded. She used to dream with her eyes open. Then, something in her dimmed, and now she's starting to glow again. Blake stopped beside a Seahawk, its rotors still intact. Kids know when we're barely holding it together. They carry our silence like sandbags. Lauren exhaled. "I didn't want her to grow up in my shadow. She's growing because of your strength, not in spite of it." Their eyes met. Not like before, not guarded, not speculative. This time there was understanding. Blake reached for a latch and opened the side door of the helicopter. "Want to see where I used to sit?" Lauren followed. Inside the space was narrow, lined with metal benches and weathered webbing. Scratches ran along the inner walls like fingerprints of old missions. Blake sat on one side, patting the bench beside him. Lauren lowered herself, cautiously smoothing her slacks. He gestured toward the ceiling. There used to be a plaque right up there. It read, "Don't leave anyone behind." She turned to look. The screws were still in place, the plaque long gone. Blake's voice softened. "I stopped believing that the night we lost Chavez." Lauren didn't speak. He continued. "We were late. Fuel delay. Wrong coordinates. By the time we reached the extraction zone, enemy fire had already pinned the team down. Chavez broke formation to drop in early, tried to buy time. He paused, his jaw tightening. He didn't make it out." Lauren reached out instinctively, her fingers brushing his. "I didn't fly again after that," he said. "I thought if I couldn't save the people I loved, I had no business wearing wings." She searched his face. "And now I think I was wrong. Maybe saving someone doesn't always look the way we expect." Blake turned to her. "Sometimes it's not about pulling someone from a wreck. Sometimes it's just sitting beside them when they finally admit they're tired." Lauren blinked. Once. Twice. Then looked away, her voice trembling for the first time. "Do you know how long it's been since I let someone sit with me like this?" Blake didn't answer. He just waited. And that silence, that trust, became a bridge. Between grief, between armor, between two lives that had run parallel for far too long. Later, they joined the kids near the open tarmac, where the wind tugged at shirts and hair. Liam was showing Mia how to salute with her left hand. Blake laughed. "That's the wrong one, Commander." "I like the left," Mia insisted. "It's closer to my heart." Lauren crouched down beside her. "That's as good a reason as any, sweetheart." Blake looked at her, something in his eyes softening, a glimpse of what could be. As they walked back toward the car, Lauren reached for the door handle, then paused. She turned to Blake. "Thank you. Not just for today. For showing up. For Mia. For me." Blake tilted his head. "You ever gonna stop saying that like it surprises you?" She smiled. "Maybe someday." He stepped closer. "Not too close. Just enough. You've never needed saving, Lauren. But everyone needs someone." Her breath caught. Then Mia called from the backseat, voice high and impatient. "Mom, can I have ice cream if I promise not to climb into another helicopter?" Blake laughed. Smart negotiator. Lauren turned back, hand brushing his as she moved past. "I'll call you," she said. And for the first time in a long time, she meant it. Not out of obligation, but out of want. Because a bridge had been built, not from strategy, not from necessity, but from trust. And trust, once born, does not retreat. The late summer sun filtered through the dusty garage windows in long golden bars. Dust motes danced in the still air, and the scent of engine oil, aged wood, and old leather lingered like the memory of another life. Blake Morgan stood near his workbench. Sleeves rolled grease smudged across one forearm. Liam sat cross-legged on the concrete floor, digging through a half-opened wooden crate, the kind that once stored flight helmets and survival gear. They were supposed to be looking for Blake's old baseball glove. Instead, they found a story. Dad Liam's voice echoed softly in the space. "What's this?" Blake turned, wiping his hands on a faded rag. "What did you find?" Liam held up a small rectangular wooden box, dark mahogany with brass hinges dulled by time. It looked unremarkable. Ordinary, even. Except for the small etched inscription in the corner. "Valor is not given. It is endured." Blake froze. He hadn't seen that box in years. Not since Okinawa. Not since the funeral. He crouched, slowly taking it from Liam's hands like it was something sacred. "Where did you—" "It was under the tarp," Liam said. "In the old locker. With the flight jacket." Blake stared at the box. Then he opened it. Inside, nestled in aged blue velvet, were 3 military decorations. The Navy and Marine Corps medal, the Distinguished Flying Cross, and at the center, the gold and blue of the Navy Cross. Liam's eyes widened. "Whoa, are those real?" Blake nodded, his voice low. "Yeah, they're real." He hadn't touched them in years, hadn't needed to. Not since the day he folded his uniform for the last time and swore he'd never measure his worth in ribbons again. Liam reached toward the Navy Cross. "This one's huge." "What did you do to get that?" Blake hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I stayed in a helicopter longer than I should have." That evening, Lauren and Mia arrived early for dinner. Mia wore a ruffled pink dress, clutching a book about planes. She ran to the back where Liam was already digging for more treasures. Blake met Lauren at the door, wiping his hands again, this time on a clean towel. He looked younger, somehow. Relaxed. But something about his eyes made Lauren pause. "What is it?" she asked. He motioned toward the side garage. "Can I show you something?" She followed without question. The garage smelled like stories waiting to be told. And there on the old workbench lay the opened box. Lauren stopped mid-step. Her eyes scanned the medals, then moved to Blake, her expression unreadable. "Is that—" she started. Blake nodded. "It's mine." Or it was. Lauren approached slowly, reverently. She didn't touch them, not yet. Instead, she looked at him. Really looked. "You never mentioned this," she said. "Didn't think it mattered. You have a Navy Cross. I had a good crew. One didn't make it back. I did. That's all." Lauren's voice softened. "That's not all, Blake." He leaned against the bench, arms crossed, not defensive, just grounded. "I used to think medals meant something," he said. "Now I think it's the things you do when no one's watching that count more." Lauren turned back to the box. Her fingers hovered over the distinguished flying cross, but didn't touch. "You think I've spent my whole career chasing stars," she said quietly. "But the truth is, I've spent it trying to prove I deserved the ones they gave me." Blake looked at her, and for the first time, saw not the general, but the woman beneath the rank. "You do," he said. "Every single one." She swallowed hard. "I've given my life to this country. I've led thousands, ordered missions that saved lives, and some that didn't. But I've never had someone look at me the way you just did." Blake stepped closer. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Lauren reached down, lifted the Navy Cross from its velvet bed, and held it in her hand. She studied the fine engraving on the back, his name date, and the quiet acknowledgement of valor. Then she looked up. "Why did you hide this?" Blake's jaw tightened. "Because I didn't want Liam to grow up thinking you had to earn love by risking your life." She stared at him for a long time, the kind of stare that sees past defenses. Then delicately, she placed the medal back in the box, shut the lid, and turned to him. "You didn't hide it," she said. "You just hadn't found someone who needed to see it yet." He blinked, and that's when he knew she wasn't just here for dinner. She was here because something inside her had shifted, because the wall between them wasn't just cracking, it was coming down. Later, the four of them sat outside under the old string lights Blake had hung last Christmas and never taken down. The kids were eating grilled cheese sandwiches and making up call signs for each other. "I'm Commander Muffin," Mia declared. "And I'm Captain Laserface," Liam shot back. Lauren laughed, really laughed, her head tipping back, eyes glistening. Blake watched her from across the table, heart aching in a way he hadn't felt in years. After the plates were cleared and the kids went inside to watch a movie, Lauren lingered near the doorway. Tonight meant something, she said. He nodded. It did. She looked down at her hands. "I don't open boxes either, not often. But I'm glad you did." Blake took a breath. "I think we both kept parts of ourselves locked away. Maybe we thought if anyone saw too deep they'd leave. And maybe," Lauren whispered, "we were just waiting for someone who'd stay." Blake stepped forward. Their hands found each other, fingers lacing without permission. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. But the promise was there, in the silence, in the touch, in the hidden medals we all carry and hope someone might one day find. The calm before the storm is never loud. It creeps in quietly in the moments that feel too perfect to last. Lauren Mitchell stood at the edge of the beach near Point Hueneme, her bare feet buried in cool sand. The wind rolled gently in from the Pacific, tousling her hair. Behind her, Mia and Liam giggled as they chased the tide, their laughter echoing against the cliffs like music. Blake stood a few paces away, arms crossed, watching the scene unfold like it was the first breath he'd taken in years. It had been 2 months since that night in the hospital, since the medals, since the bridge of trust was crossed. They hadn't said what they were to each other, not out loud, but they didn't need to. Lauren had begun to wear less steel and more softness. Blake had started to open doors he once boarded shut. And the children, God, the children had become the sun around which both their worlds revolved. But peace has a way of drawing attention, especially when someone powerful decides you've had too much of it. The phone rang just after 6 a.m. the next morning. Lauren answered out of habit, voice, sharp eyes still heavy with sleep. Mitchell. General, this is Colonel Wexler from Pentagon Compliance. I'm calling in regard to your command record and oversight of Fleet Recon Unit 7 during your Okinawa rotation. Lauren sat up, tension ripping through her spine. That deployment ended 3 years ago. We've received a formal inquiry, Wexler continued, tone clinical. Allegations of mismanagement, improper shielding of subordinate misconduct. We'll be requesting your presence at an internal hearing next week. She was already out of bed, pacing. On whose authority? Office of Naval Inspector General. It's not a court-martial. Yet. But it's serious. A pause. And confidential. For now. Click. Silence. Lauren stood in her hallway, heart-pounding, breath shallow. It was happening again. By midday, the headlines began to whisper. 4-star under fire, Mitchell. Linked to suppression of fleet inquiry, Pacific hero or shielding scandal. Lauren stared at her computer screen as the news spread like oil on water, slick, fast, and impossible to contain. Her hands trembled. She knew this wasn't about guilt. It was about legacy. About old rivals in high places deciding that she'd shined a little too long in a male-dominated sky. She'd followed every protocol, and still they came for her. The same way they'd come for others before her quiet assassinations by bureaucracy. She opened her bottom drawer and pulled out her retirement letter. Blank, but ready. She'd kept it there for years, just in case. Now it felt heavier than any briefing binder. Blake found her in her backyard that evening. She was sitting on the patio, hair down, phone silent on the table. She didn't look up when he approached. You heard it, she said. I did, he replied gently. She exhaled, but it wasn't relief. It was surrender. I've spent a lifetime walking a tightrope, Blake. One misstep, real or imagined, and they're ready to erase everything. He pulled out a chair. Sat down. I led with integrity, she said, eyes distant. But politics doesn't care about truth. It cares about control, optics, blood if it needs it. You're not them, he said. But I still wear their uniform. She looked at him, eyes glassy, unspoken fear behind the strength. They'll investigate, twist things, drag my name through the mud until it's not a name anymore. Just a headline. Blake leaned in. Then let it be a headline. You're more than your stars. She shook her head. You don't get it. This is who I am. No, Blake said softly. That's who you were. Who you are is the woman who showed a little girl that generals can cry, who sat in my garage and held my pain without blinking, who helped Liam name a turtle. A tear slipped down her cheek. He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. You're allowed to be tired, he said. You're allowed to walk away. She looked up, eyes searching. You think I should quit? I think you already did. The day you let someone in. The silence that followed was sacred, because he wasn't pushing her. He was offering her a hand, a choice, something no one had done for her in years. The next day she filed the paperwork. Voluntary retirement, honorable exit. A choice made, not forced. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like letting go of a piece of herself she hadn't realized had been keeping her afloat. She stepped out of the office building as the sun set behind the base. The guard at the gate saluted her for the last time in uniform. She returned it. Not with pride. Not with pain. But with peace. That night, Blake cooked dinner. Nothing fancy, just grilled salmon, buttered rice, and roasted vegetables. Lauren showed up late. Mia in tow eyes, tired but grateful. The kids ran off, letting the grown-ups talk. They sat together on the porch, dusk, bleeding into night. I thought I'd feel empty, Lauren admitted, but mostly, I just feel quiet. Blake passed her a cup of tea. That's what happens when the storm finally ends. She smiled weakly. You really believe this isn't the end? He turned toward her. No, Lauren. This is the beginning. Not the one you planned, but maybe the one you needed. They sat there, shoulder to shoulder, no stars on her chest, no medals in his pocket. Just two people who had let fear come and let it go. Together. The air on the tarmac was unusually still. No jets screaming overhead, no boots thudding on concrete. Just a long stretch of runway flanked by two neat columns of saluting service members, in full dress uniform shoulders, squared chins raised. They had gathered not for protocol, but for respect. Lieutenant General Lauren Mitchell was retiring, not quietly as she once might have preferred, not in disgrace as the headlines had tried to suggest, but on her own terms, with her head held high. At the far end of the procession, a podium stood modest and flanked by two flags. No reporters, no political pageantry, just her people. And in the front row, Blake Morgan sat in his green fatigues, hands folded steady. Beside him, Mia clutched his fingers with one hand, and Liam's with the other. Lauren had invited them personally. "I want you there," she'd said. "Both of you. All of you." And now, as she stepped onto the runway in her dress uniform for the final time, she looked out across the sea of solemn faces and saw them. Not the generals, not the politicians, but them. The family she hadn't expected, the family she had chosen. She walked between the ranks of saluting officers with quiet grace. Her 4 stars glimmered against her chest, but today they felt weightless, not because they meant less, but because she no longer needed them to feel whole. As she reached the podium, the base commander stepped aside. No lengthy introductions, no summary of her 30-year career. Everyone here already knew. Lauren adjusted the microphone. Her voice when it came was clear, steady, measured like every briefing she had ever given, but softer, warmer. "When I joined the Navy," she began, "I thought strength came from silence. That leadership meant hiding the cracks. That vulnerability was a liability." She paused, letting the words settle. "I wore these stars like armor. I spoke in commands. I lived in briefings and deployments. And for years, it worked. A beat. But the truth is, strength isn't silence. Strength is knowing when to speak, when to share, when to ask for help." Somewhere in the back row, a young officer nodded slowly. "I led brave men and women into storms. I watched some return. I wrote letters for those who didn't. I made decisions no one should have to make. And still, the hardest thing I ever did was let someone see me as human." Lauren looked toward the front row, right at Blake, right at Mia. "I found out late in my career that leadership isn't just about commanding, it's about connecting, and that sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones in uniform." Murmurs rippled quietly through the rows. Lauren reached to her chest and unclipped one of the 4 golden stars. The silence deepened. She stepped off the podium, heels clicking gently against the runway, and knelt before Mia. "Do you know what this is?" she asked softly. Mia's eyes were wide. "A star." "Correct?" Lauren smiled. "It's a symbol of service, of responsibility, and of courage." She pinned the star onto Mia's pink dress just above the heart. But courage doesn't just live in battlefields. It lives in kindness, in speaking up, in sharing fries with someone new. The entire runway, once cold and formal, warmed in the sunlight of that moment. Lauren stood and saluted her daughter. The crowd officers and enlisted alike rose and erupted into applause, not polite, not obligatory, but real, from those who knew what it meant to carry weight and to lay it down. After the ceremony, the crowd thinned. The salutes turned into handshakes, hugs, quiet nods of respect. Lauren found herself beside Blake once more, near the edge of the tarmac, the afternoon sun stretching long across the ground. "You know he said you stole the show," she chuckled. "Did I?" I saw a few hardened captains wiping their eyes. Lauren looked at him, something tender in her expression. I meant every word. He nodded. I know. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Then Blake added, giving Mia that star. It was more than ceremony. It was her reminder, Lauren said, that being brave doesn't mean being loud. It means being true. She'll remember. I hope so. A pause. Then Lauren took his hand. Openly. Not a secret. Not a maybe. A beginning. That evening, the four of them returned to Harbor Diner. No cameras, no brass, no expectations. Just a booth by the window. The same one where it all began. The waitress Deb raised her eyebrows as they slid in. Well, if it isn't General and Company, retired Lauren corrected, slipping off her jacket. Deb nodded. You look lighter without the stars. I feel it, Lauren replied. They ordered fried chicken, fries, lemon pie for dessert. When the food arrived, Mia looked at her plate, then at Liam's. Can we share again? She asked. Liam grinned. That's the only rule around here. Blake and Lauren exchanged a look, warm, grateful, quietly amazed. Because a shared plate had once opened a door neither of them thought would ever exist. And now it was a bridge they crossed every day, together. The ocean had a way of whispering when the world grew still. Lauren Mitchell stood alone near the edge of the rocky shoreline at Ventura Point, her boots nestled in damp sand, her uniform long since retired. Her hair was looser now, swept back by the salty breeze, strands dancing across her cheek, as if stirred by memory itself. The ceremony had been 3 days ago. 3 days of silence. 3 days since the applause ended. 3 days since she'd walked away from a world she'd carried on her shoulders and towards something she still didn't have the words for. She hadn't called Blake, not because she didn't want to, but because she was scared, not of him, of herself. Because she had stood across battlefields, stared down foreign commanders, even outlasted DC smear campaigns. But loving someone that was a mission she'd never trained for. So she waited, hoping he'd understand, praying he wouldn't. And then just as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky with molten gold, she heard footsteps. Soft. Familiar. She didn't turn, but her breath caught. Blake stopped beside her, hands in the pockets of his worn fatigue jacket, his hair tied back against the breeze stubble catching the last of the sun like old firelight. I had a feeling I'd find you here, he said. She smiled without looking. Was I that predictable? No, he replied. But you left your jacket at my place, and I figured anyone who walks away from a 4-star career needs somewhere to stand still for a while. Lauren finally turned. Her eyes met his. Not as general and janitor, not as mother and widower, just 2 people. Scarred, softened, seen. I've been thinking, she said. That sounds dangerous, he teased gently, but his voice was tender. Listening. I used to believe strength meant staying alone, she said. Not depending on anyone. Not needing anyone. And now. She exhaled, eyes misted. I think strength is letting someone stay, even when you don't know how to ask. He stepped closer. Not rushing, not demanding. Just there. Her voice trembled. I'm not easy. I live in my head too much. I still wake up at 4 a.m., even when I don't have to. And Blake reached out, cupping her cheek. You don't have to explain, he said. You just have to be. Her eyes closed under his touch. She hadn't been held like that in years. Not like a decoration, not like a reward, but like a promise. He leaned in, slow, searching her face for permission. She gave it without a word. Their lips met like waves meeting shore, soft, at first tentative. Then sure. No fireworks, no soundtrack. Just warmth breath, and the deep unspoken relief of coming home to someone who didn't flinch when they saw the whole of you. When they parted, her forehead rested against his. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he said. "But maybe that means we're finally doing something brave." She smiled, and this time it wasn't measured. Later, they sat on the back of his old pickup parked near the dunes. The kids were in the truck bed wrapped in blankets watching the stars like tiny astronomers charting new constellations. Mia pointed upward. "That one's mine. I call it General Twinkle." Liam laughed. "That sounds like a pony." "Maybe it is," Mia declared. Lauren leaned against Blake, his arm wrapped around her shoulder. For a long while, neither spoke. Then she asked, "You ever think about flying again?" He hesitated. "Every day." "Why don't you? 'Cause I already have what I was chasing up there," he said. "Peace, clarity, and someone worth landing for." Lauren turned toward him, the weight of his words hitting deeper than any compliment ever could. "You say things like that," she murmured, "and I start thinking, this isn't just a chapter, it's a whole new book." Blake smiled. "Let's write it together." Back at her house, Lauren stood in the doorway, Mia already asleep in her arms. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For staying." He looked at her. "I didn't stay because you needed me," he said. "I stayed because I needed you too." Their eyes met, and in that stillness, something sacred passed between them. Not the rush of young love, not the desperation of loneliness, but the steady, sure, soul-deep truth that love, when patient, finds its way, even to those who had given up waiting. A year had passed, not rushed, not dramatic, just quietly lived, one sunrise, one packed lunch, one shared story at a time. The harbor diner looked the same as it always had. Red vinyl booths, faded pie of the day sign, salt and pepper shakers that rattled when you bumped the table too hard. But to Blake Morgan, it didn't feel the same. Not anymore, because now it was filled with laughter. Two children's voices dancing over the scent of fried chicken and sweet tea. Tiny legs swinging beneath the booth. A pink backpack hanging off one side. A green maintenance jacket slung over the other. And between them, in the warm center of it all, Lauren. Not General Mitchell, just Lauren. Wearing a soft cotton blouse, hair pulled back with a pencil. The woman who once bore 4 stars on her shoulders now wore something lighter across her face. Peace. Joy. Home. Blake slid into the booth across from her, placing 2 extra napkins on the table. "Liam said you forgot your lemonade tax." Lauren smirked. "Tell him it's been repealed." Too late. He's starting a petition. They both chuckled. Mia piped up from beside her mom. "Mommy, can I order what Liam gets? The one with the crispy chicken and the curly fries?" Lauren turned to her with mock seriousness. "That's a very advanced choice. You sure you're ready for that responsibility?" Mia grinned. "I was born ready." Blake leaned in. "That's exactly what your mom said when she stole my last fry a year ago." "I shared that fry," Lauren protested. "You shared it with yourself." They all laughed because now laughing came easy. After the waitress took their order, Mia looked across the table and said the words that froze time. "Mommy, do you remember the first day we met, Mr. Blake?" Lauren paused, then nodded slowly. "How could I forget?" Mia pointed at the plate in front of her. "I wanted his chicken." Liam chimed in, and Dad offered half of it without asking me. Blake shrugged. "Some battles are worth losing." The table burst into laughter again, but Lauren's eyes lingered on Blake, on Liam, on the shimmer of sunlight pouring through the windows. Then she said quietly, "That was the day everything changed. Everyone stilled. Not awkward, just reflective, because everyone knew it was true." Blake reached across the table, took her hand gently. "That was the day everything began." Later after lunch, they stayed longer than usual. The diner's crowd thinned. The jukebox hummed something old and familiar. Lauren pulled out a small photo frame wrapped in brown paper and set it on the table. "For you," she said. Blake raised an eyebrow. "Early birthday. Just overdue." He unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a black and white photo taken from the ceremony runway a year ago. Lauren standing with Mia, Blake beside Liam. 4 hands linked, one sun overhead. But it wasn't the photo that made his chest tighten. It was the inscription etched in brass along the bottom. "Sometimes the highest rank is love." Blake stared at it for a long moment, then looked up. "I don't deserve this." Lauren reached over and touched his face. "You do. You always did. You just forgot." He swallowed hard, and in that diner booth with children drawing napkin superheroes and refills of lemonade sweating in their glasses, Blake Morgan remembered something he hadn't let himself believe in years. He had saved lives before. But now he was living one. Outside, the afternoon light spilled gently across the sidewalk. They walked slowly, hand in hand, kids skipping ahead like twin beacons of joy. As they passed by the corner window, Deb, the longtime waitress, waved from behind the counter. "You two are my favorite story," she called out. Blake laughed. "I thought you didn't believe in happy endings." "I don't," she said. "But I believe in earned ones." Lauren squeezed his hand. He looked at her. "You think this is a happy ending?" She smiled. "No," she whispered. "This is a quiet beginning." That night, in their shared home overlooking the cliffs, Lauren tucked Mia into bed, while Blake read Liam a chapter from an old adventure novel. The stars shimmered beyond the windows. The wind was calm. And somewhere in the kitchen, on a small corkboard, by the fridge, hung that photo from the diner, 4 hands, 1 light. Underneath it, a simple note in Lauren's handwriting. "He didn't need a uniform to be my hero." We'd love to know where you're watching from. Tell us in the comments what part of the world you call home. Every message from you reminds us how kindness, courage, and love can travel farther than any distance. If this story touched your heart, we'd be honored to have you stay with us. Subscribe to our channel and join a community that believes quiet heroes still walk among us. Thank you truly for spending this time with us. Until next time, take care of yourself, hold your loved ones close, and never forget. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness changes everything.